just in terms of programming announcements, just a couple of things to keep your eye on. We're continuing with this series on the stages of the path according to the 5th Dalai Lama and with glosses by His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama. And we will be doing a little bit of Gampopa's precious Garland of the Supreme Path along with that. However, not today, because Geshe said there's still a couple of things in Vajrasattva that he wants to cover. So I hope people don't mind. It's Geshe just wanted to wrap up a few loose ends with Vajrasattva. The next thing, mentioning Vajrasattva, is that it's on a weekday, unfortunately. I don't know if Abhilash has access to the information of when it is, but the day of the Buddha turning the wheel of the Dharma. In Tibetan, this is known as Chokor Duche. So it is on a weekday. So we'll do what we usually do, which is from about 8 a.m. until 8:45 or 9 a.m. because, people have to go to work and stuff. Geshe will give a few transmissions. So his idea this time is to give a transmission of the Sutra recollecting the three jewels. That's something that Lama Zopa Rinpoche recommended reciting on special Buddha days. So he'll give that transmission, and then time depending, we may recite that together in English. Then Geshe, he will give also the Vajrasattva mantra transmission of the 100-syllable mantra, as well as an explanation of the meaning of the 100-syllable mantra. So that is kind of the idea for that day. If you have to be at work earlier and you're sad about missing, don't worry. The explanation of Vajrasattva and everything, that will be available for you to watch on YouTube later. And then on the 26th of this month, it will be the Chakra Samvara teachings at 10 a.m. in the morning, as usual. And then in August, we'll take a break from the Highest Yoga Tantra, but have all the videos available to view for catch-up. I hope I'm not speaking too soon, because I think we discussed this with the management, but the first weekend of August, Saturday and Sunday, this is a long weekend holiday up here in Canada, so we won't be having any programs that weekend. But every other weekend of the summer, there will be programming available for you. So I think that that's all the announcements I wanted to make. Please grab yourself a cup of tea or coffee, make yourselves comfortable. I'll invite Geshe to come down. So is everybody happy with the camera angle? You can see Geshe all right? Okay,
Yeah.
great.
He
He says, don't start right away, Kedrup. I have something to say. Okay. So first of all, Tashi Daily to everyone from Geshe. Can everyone hear his voice okay as well as mine? Can you hear Geshe? Okay, great, great. So first of all, Tashi Dele, greetings to everybody. And as always, Geshe hopes that your study and your practice of the teachings are improving and going well. So of course, just to kind of frame this gathering, the reason for all of us gathering today, we gather together based on sort of a common understanding that happiness is something that has to be cultivated according to internal causes. And we understand, right, that fundamentally the nature of samsara or cyclic existence is that the things within it are not able to give us real lasting happiness, right? That's not to dismiss samsaric happiness and to say it's not important at all or that we don't need it. Certainly as beginners, right, a measure of samsaric happiness is important. But if we chase merely after samsaric happiness, then in terms of the great opportunity that we have with this human rebirth, in terms of the great meaning that can be derived from it, right, this will be a great waste. It will be a great loss. So we know the story of the Buddha, right? He was a prince, the son of a king, but he saw that those samsaric enjoyments in the palace, they didn't have any lasting essence. And based upon that, he left all of it behind in search of enlightenment. So another thing to understand is that at the time of the Buddha, there were profound spiritual traditions, right, in the land that we now know as India. So there were, systems of meditation that could take beings out of the desire realm. But according to the Buddhist understanding, this can only take you into the form and formless deva realms. It could only take you that far. So the Buddha's first teacher, he was actually explaining this philosophy where through meditative concentration, one can reach the formless realm. And in the formless realm, there are said to be 4 kind of subdivisions. One could reach the third, which is just one down from the highest of those. And so that teacher, he had achieved that level of the 3rd subdivision of the formless realm, but had gone no further. And so he taught students to develop that concentration to reach the 3rd subdivision of the 4 formless realms through cultivating a kind of meditative concentration, which is basically not thinking of anything at all, emptying the mind of thoughts. So, of course, in modern presentations of meditation, this is like an easy meditation that we do to relax, just not think about anything, right? But here, this is done for a spiritual purpose of being able to achieve a rebirth within these formless realms. Zume tambo.
도모니 강에테 도야 말 고즈메 스마그는 내려와
Ale. Yine sorry, tambo ni sana karete.
다 zume
Zume tambo ni kare kangete tugi mare nyomo.
녀모
Nyomongi. Ale. Ye nyomong chikang mepa tanda. Yabo komansu.
zume 네 시야로 왔어 만다와시
Yes.
도모니 녀모 내바시 도야 말에스
Ale. Tambo. Tsena toshin ni den so.
말만
Mawa den so. Ale. And so then, okay, we speak about we speak about the desire, form, and formless realms. So in terms of the afflictions, dukam ginyumong
녀모 내바시 도야 말에스
sukamla.
미탄다 텐다 마지하러와
Okay, right.
zuge 녀모 내바시 도야 말에 zume 저거 눈에 도모니 되게 내바시 도야 말에스
So in terms of this teacher of the Buddha, he had reached like a state of a kind of liberation from all of the afflictions of the desire realm, from the afflictions related to the form realm, and as well from the first two afflictions related to the formless realm. Sumekam nyomong ni karere.
zume 시게 노래 다 돈보 델라노서 하고 말 노카타이 노시타이스 메만다요
Los.
사점 다
Yeah.
remember
Right. And so this kind of ascension is covered along sort of 4 subdivisions within the formless realm.
다 델리체 토가 다 되게 손지 되게 단 적으면 됐어. 되게 다 대신에는 단다래면 됐어.
Yeah. But the Buddha saw through studying with this teacher that even applying these meditations to reach these formless realms, he couldn't find the final and stable happiness that he was seeking.
Lama 최슈도 라셰바 라셰바스. 그래서 Lama 디메라. 다 델리 라가지 디디가는 좀 말이야 말했어.
But the teacher explained to the Buddha, his name was La Chepa. I don't know the Sanskrit for that. La Chepa is like born from a deva. It means something like that. So so his name in Sanskrit probably has deva in it somewhere. But anyways, in Tibetan, it's La Chepa. And so he said to the Buddha, that this is all I know how to teach. And as far as I know, this is the highest path that is available in this world.
대산로는 연례치 제거들은 월다 리라보고 돈이 다시 디세서 워마도바 세도고 띵에서 강가 토바레스.
But the Buddha, he did study with this teacher and was able to reach kind of that level of abandonment of the afflictions in the formless realm, the highest that he could get through that path. And so this brings you to a type of single-pointed concentration, which takes you to the very final boundary. The highest type of concentration, which takes you to the boundary of the formless realm.
So
the Buddha thought, this is great progress, this is amazing progress, but even having reached here, this is not the sort of final stable happiness that I really want to achieve. So La Chepa, this teacher who was explaining the system of meditation to the Buddha, he said, as far as I know, this is the highest teaching we have in the world. But if you find something higher that can take you beyond this level, please come back and teach it to me. So he was an honest person, right, who acknowledged his limitations. And then as the story goes, we know that after this, the Buddha, he embarked on like 6 years of ascetic practice and meditation. So these practices, right, they might not take one to the final level, but they do show the value of something, which is that as long as we are distracted, as long as the mind is always going out in many, many different directions to many objects of distraction, we won't be able to have a peaceful, calmer, concentrated mind. We know this.
그렇게 너도 강가가야를 놀래 동보대 너가 타이 세리 너가 노진 저거 주사지와 말에서는 렐레지는 돼야 돼.
So the first kind of stage of meditation in this formless realm, it means something like the limits of the sky. 남카 낭신 주가주사 치경메 버레스.
어다치 가리는 저거 주사 뭐 대기자 손으로 셀 야금이.
So it means that there is no pinpointable phenomena whatsoever. So we just keep this sky-like vastness. We hold on to nothing in one's mind. So it's not emptiness, although the vocabulary is similar. It's not emptiness in the same way that we would meditate on it. So there's a great benefit to that system of practice of emptying the mind of thoughts, keeping it vast in this way. So difficult emotions, difficult thoughts, distractions, all of these can be pacified through this system. And this type of meditation, actually, we could say that it is a type of meditation that is practiced commonly between what the Tibetans call the holders of the outer tenets. These are Indian traditions that we would now mostly call like Hinduism and Jainism, and the Buddhist tradition. So these are practiced across those spiritual traditions. So when one has this idea of kind of like this vastness of the sky dawning in the mind, then Chilula drogores, karechene chilula drogores. Oh, okay. So then when one 남카 낭신선의 셈 낭로라 레도아 탄다 치로라 여레세기도아. Okay, so the problem with this system of meditation, as I understand, is that by saying that the mind is like the sky, the mind immediately begins to think of the sky. When the mind immediately begins to think of the sky, it goes to an outward object. And because through this system, the mind is still going to an outward object, one cannot reach this refined level of concentration. So then one comes to the second level within these formless realms meditation, saying that the mind is sky-like, realizing that because of that, the mind is still going to an outward object, thinking of the sky, one wants to turn inwards. So in the second level of the formless realm meditation, one turns attention inwards to the namkyen, to the mental consciousness. So that's the limitless sky is the first one. The second one is the limitless mental consciousness. So this is a very beneficial practice, right? Because not only does it calm the mind when one looks at the mental consciousness nakedly, sees that there is nothing to grasp, but also it's more powerful than the previous sky-like or limitless sky meditation, because instead of thinking of the outer example of the sky, one's attention is focused completely internally. So this is the second type of formless realm meditation. So this is common to the Buddhist and non-Buddhist traditions once again, and it is a very powerful meditation in terms of not being able to get rid of, but to greatly reduce the afflictions, also stopping the namtok, the discursive thoughts, projecting thoughts and so forth. It can help us with all of these things. So it's a high level of meditation, right? This one focusing on the mental consciousness. But because it is kind of holding the mental consciousness as its object, 건다 미큐 요청 Ngawang. But because it has to hold on to the mental consciousness as an object, and it has to hold on to that firmly, meditators experience a feeling of no satisfaction. They never feel that they are like holding on to that object of meditation sufficiently. So there's a kind of dissatisfaction with that type of meditation. Right. So then this brings you to the third of the formless realm meditations, which is emptying the mind of thoughts completely. So this is reaching the limits of thought meditation. It is just emptying the mind of any thoughts whatsoever. And because with this type of meditation, not only is there nothing to be pinpointed at, but the mind does not have to hold on to any specific object, right? The yogi or the yogini, they're experiencing a very powerful type of mental peace from that meditation. But there is still a subtle form of tightness, because in the back, you've emptied the mind of thoughts, but there's still an anxiety. I mustn't think about anything. If you've ever tried these, I think you'll see how this is true, actually. So Geshe is saying that, then you're saying, don't think of anything. So there's this little voice in the back of your head saying, I mustn't think of anything. I mustn't think of anything. This is also causing some tension. Okay. Oh, right. This or that. Okay. Yeah. 하고선. Yeah. Right. And so there is nothing pinpointable at all. There is no thought whatsoever. So that is the level that one is trying to get to. But then thinking that there is nothing to think whatsoever, there is nothing to think at all, this is a problem, because as long as the mind is present, there's going to be some sort of thought that is present. Yes. So these are the four types of formless realm meditations, and these are things that can have a measure of usefulness in our life that we can also try out in our lives. So what His Holiness the Dalai Lama has said is that effectively what the problem is because at any one time our mind is going out in multiple directions to multiple objects, we're not able to focus the mind on a single object, which is necessary, right, for practice. So it's like if you think of water, for example, right? If you're kind of spraying the water in a wide way, that's not going to be as focused as like a very narrow stream of water where you can have a much more powerful pressure. So it's a bit like that. But if you're able to sort of combine the currents of the water into one very sort of high pressure stream, right? We know how useful that is for cleaning a clogged pipe, for, doing all different types of work. So that kind of focus gives more power. Yeah, so in fact, when we do these preliminary meditations with Geshe, what he's trying to help you do is to focus the mind to make it more powerful.
So those are
very important. So those are very important, the 4 formless realm meditations. So now we'll just take a moment to relax and focus the mind. So just without thinking of anything in particular, allow the mind to relax, to be in a peaceful state. Bring the 4 elements into balance.
So
think that just like water particles in the sky are evaporated by the sun, in this way, all of our distracting thoughts are pacified. And the nature of the mind, its pure and luminous nature, is revealed.
The
nature of the mind is something like the ocean, profoundly vast, deep, and clear. It is powerful.
So
the mind has no shape, no specific color, and so forth. Yet at the same time, it is like a mirror. It is able to cognize. It is able to bring forth an understanding of any object or phenomena.
So
this mind, its vastness, its clear and knowing nature, is at the same time something that is fundamentally neutral, fundamentally in a nature of equanimity. So within this mind, we want to bring forth a thought that sees all beings with loving concern. So this is known as affectionate love, a mind that sees all beings as attractive. So this mind thinks of self, others, friends, strangers, any of the 6 types of beings within samsara. There's not a single one which I have never been close to. Every single one of those beings is close to me, and I see them with this mind of affectionate love.
Because
they are close to me, freeing them from suffering, leading them to happiness, this is my personal responsibility. I must definitely achieve that. In order to be able to do this, to do just as I have thought, With single pointedness, I will make requests to the holy beings for their blessings. Chiksoga, sorry again. Sorry, I realized I need to adjust the sound so that you can hear the chanting. Just a moment. So Geshe said, next time he's going to give me a list of these 4 formless realms, because I was saying to Geshe, usually he gives me a bit of a warning if there's something with complicated names, but he didn't today. So so if you're eager to know the name of these formless realms and the different types of meditation, we'll have those ready for you next time. Sorry about that. Oh, not next time. So I'll post it to Facebook, and maybe I'll ask Minoshi to put it in the newsletter as well for those of you who are not on Facebook.
Oh, yeah.
So we'll begin with the chanting. Tumba chom den de jin sheba dra chom ba yan da ba zo be sangye je ba dang shab su dem ba de war sheba jiten kemba kebudu ve kalo gyorwa lana meba lada minam gitemba sangye chom dende pe jawa shakya tu bala chabsu chede kyabsu chi ho. Sorry. Tumba chom dende deshin sheba dra chom ba yang da ba zo be sangye sheba dang shabsu demba dewa sheba shiden chamba chebu dewe kalo jurwa lana meba ladam minam gi tumba sangye chom dende be jawa shagya tuba la chasero chede kyabsu chi ho. Tumba chom dende deshin sheba dra chom ba yang da ba zo be sangye sheba dang shabsu demba dewa sheba shiden chamba chebu dewe kalo jurwa lana meba ladam minam gi tumba sangye chom dende pe jawa shagya tuba la chazelo chede kyabsu chi ho. Saji Pekishi Meto Chan Rira Lingshi Nidi Gyamba Di Sangye Shindu Mede Buwagi Jogu Nanda Shila Cheba Sho Idam Guru Ratna Mendalaka Niryadayami. Refuge and Bodhicitta. Sogi Chunam La Jangchu Badu Dani Gyatso Chi Dagi Jins Gibe Sonam Ki Jola Penjir Sangye Drupa Sho Chudam Sogi Chunam La Jangchu Badu Dani Gyatso Chi Dagi Chunyen Gibe Sonam Ki Jola Penjir Sangye Drupa Sho Chedam Sogi Chenam La Jangchu Bardu Dani Gyatso Chi Dagi Chenyen Gibe Sonam Gi Jola Penjir Sangye Droba Sho.
Oh yeah, that to me when you got it. Oh, that Savia, but that's a good.
So during the motivation, of course, what we want to do is we want to place a powerful and positive seed within the field of the mind. But before doing that, we need to prepare the field of the mind by removing the various rocks and so forth. And so in order to do this, we'll do some preliminary meditations to settle the mind. So as before, in that formless meditation that Geshe mentioned, just relax your mind and allow yourself not to think about anything. Don't arise any thought whatsoever. So then, having relaxed the mind in this way, then just put your attention on the breath, thinking, breathing in, I'm aware I'm breathing in, breathing out, I'm aware I'm breathing out. So then as our mind becomes calm and vast, even if there's thoughts or distractions that arise, they're just like tiny little fish, little minnows beneath the surface of the water. We might see them swimming beneath the water, but they're not going to disturb the water. So then once the mind becomes further calm, we'll bring forth an object of focus in our meditation. So we can picture in the space in front of us the teacher, Buddha Shakyamuni.
Lama
Think that this Buddha Shakyamuni is the essence of all of the spiritual teachers, meditational deities, holy beings. In order to reach a state where I can be of true benefit to all sentient beings, I will go for refuge to the Buddha, the teacher. Because the Buddha has completely defeated the four maras or demons, he is completely beyond them and therefore able to provide us true protection and refuge. So think, I myself also, in order to be able to lead all beings to happiness and complete liberation from suffering, I must achieve the same enlightenment that the Buddha achieved. Therefore, in order to achieve enlightenment for all, I turn to him for refuge. Bring forth bodhicitta.
송지자 첨부 되게 투마 니지 니는 고주 사태 연속을 때려 고주는 들어서 땅아로서도 너 메르봤어 어다 땡데 들어도 그래 정말로.
In order to bring forth this compassion that underpins bodhicitta, we are definitely capable of it. If the being who became the Buddha first gave rise to great compassion in the hell realms, certainly with my human rebirth, I can give rise to great compassion. So we'll pause there.
어다 들으지래는데 어다 대지 되는 게는 간수 뽑아시 요 토야지래 손중에 속에 때를 다 집어러 왔다 뭐.
Sorry, I saw a request. I saw a request, but it flashed on my screen. So I'm happy to adjust the mic, but I just didn't see what the person asked for. Abhilash, do you see what they were asking? Maybe it was you.
Sorry, I missed this.
Okay. Did someone ask me something or not?
Yes, it was me. Can you please turn off the music sounds?
You want the music sound turned off? Okay.
Yes. Oh, this is great. Much better.
Okay. Yeah, it's sorry. I think normally we try not to have the fans on, but today is really unbearable. So yes, if the fan is irritating you, don't be afraid to tell me, because it's easy to turn off.
This is good. Thanks a lot.
It's good. Okay, great. Yeah. No, so don't be afraid, folks, to tell me if there's something I can do to improve the sound quality. Always happy to.
Gondagana.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, this that tanging and so zoom is you can like it as once. That day, Tumbani pet out on Roma talking at there's a umboto bogin, let's go.
So we mentioned this practice, right, of these 4 formless realm meditations. And we also mentioned, though, that it can't take you to that final view of emptiness. At the same time, right, it's a shared kind of system of meditation that we have between the Buddhist and the non-Buddhist traditions. And also you'll find actually in both the Shravakayana, so the Theravada system, as well as the Mahayana system, this kind of formless realm meditation tradition. His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Geshe said in his kind of indomitable way, says that, if we practice emptiness, actually, we're not going to need these 4 formless realm meditations, actually. And so, the philosophical framework of these formless meditations is the practitioner first meditates like on the disadvantages of the desire realm, and then thinks about the advantages of the form and the formless realm, and then meditates to achieve that.
So there, the practitioner in this way, right? He or she is meditating, but they have this motivation that the desire realm is just full of so many problems, right? And there's no true peace to be found there. But if I were to take rebirth in the form or the formless realm, there'd be far fewer problems. I'd be able to develop concentration, and I'd be able to have a kind of more stable source of peace. So that's the kind of thinking behind that practice. And so this is how the practitioner, moves up through these 3 realms, right? They're still within samsara, but goes from the desire realm to the form realm and then to the formless realm. But the problem here, or maybe not the problem, but the drawback, that's a better word. The drawback here is that because the practitioner is not meditating on emptiness, he or she is not able to see the very subtle problems of samsara and the solution to those subtle problems. So it's a little bit like somebody who wants to emigrate from their country, right? They see sort of all of the problems and difficulties of the place where they're living. And then they think, if I were to move to this other country, I would have fewer problems and be happier. It's a little bit like that way of thinking. And so it's a little bit like that when you go from the desire realm to the form or the formless realms, right? Seeing the problems in one place, you develop the aspiration to go somewhere else. So it's not an easy practice, these formless meditations, and in fact it can get rid of the coarser level of the afflictions. So although it's not the final system, there's quite some benefit.
So
on the Buddhist path, though, of course, we know that in order to completely eradicate all of the samsaric afflictions and their imprints, we need to meditate on emptiness, right? So meditation on emptiness is always going to be our final goal. So Geshe said a little bit of a long introduction, but anyways, all of these important points. And as I said, I will get you the name of those formless realms and the systems of meditation fully. So Geshe said that in terms of where we are in our text, and I believe we're on the bottom of page 44 or maybe the beginning of page 95 in the 14th Dalai Lama Stages of the Path, he said that actually there's a lot of comments from the great 14th Dalai Lama, but Geshe feels that a lot of these are very nyembo. They're very pleasing to the ear. So he's going to share quite a few of them with you and then comment on them. So, it's talking a lot about faults that all of us have, right? Which are preventing our progress, right? Which are the three faults of the pot: the upside down pot, the leaky pot, and the contaminated pot. But there's a lot of extra kind of explanation there that reveals even more meaning. Yeah. So Geshe said that, and so Nod, if you remember this story, do you remember the story of the mice and the marmot? Maybe it's some kind of marmot or a very small kind of bear. Do you guys remember that story? Okay, so I'll tell it to you. Anyway, so what happens is this creature, he catches mice, right? That's his food, actually. And but there's a problem. And the problem is that every time he catches a mouse, he lifts up his backside. So the previous mouse, yeah, so Geshe said these are creatures that abide in the mountain. It sounds like some kind of marmot or maybe like a type of weasel or a small bear, something like that. Anyways, but every time he lifts up his backside, the previous mouse he caught runs away. So no matter how many mice he catches, he never builds up a stockpile. Yeah, so the way that he finds his food is he's like hidden in a burrow, and when a mouse runs by, he grabs it, hits it on the top of the head, and puts it under his buttocks, and that's how he keeps them. But the problem is when he lifts his buttocks, the previous mouse runs off. So Geshe said that that's a little bit what we're like with teachings, right? Like we see the new thing, and we get like excited about that, and we sort of catch that one. But in the meantime, we forget what we already learned, and the old one runs away. So because we're always going after the new one, we never benefit from the old one. So whether this marmot-like creature, he ends up with even one mouse at the end of this story or not, right? That's up to interpretation, but certainly not more than one. So And Geshe said that when he was studying, when the students are studying at the 3 seats, so this means Drepung, Sera, and Ganden, right? When they are studying at the 3 seats, this is really the advice that they get from their teachers, Don't be like that marmot, learn the thing really well and mix that in your mind before moving on to the next thing, because otherwise you're always going to be distracted in your studies because there's always exciting things to learn. So Geshe is just explaining that he's not saying that it's bad to be interested in different things. Certainly that's not the case, right? But what you don't want to do is never learn anything well so that you come away with nothing. Because all of the teachings that we receive, no matter what they're called, they're for the purpose of reducing the afflictions. And if we go to many teachings, but we never retain or become skilled in any of them, we won't have the antidotes to the afflictions that we want to cultivate. So another story that came to mind that Geshe wants to share, well, he still remembers, because last time I think he said he would tell a story and then someone asked, can we get the story? He's not sure if it's that one. So at the time that Zapatro Rinpoche was giving the teachings that became this text that we were looking at, right? The words of my perfect teacher. There was it was like an encampment, basically. And there was a great assembly of people listening. So there was one listener to the teachings who kind of came a little bit late. And after he was there 1 or 2 days, he thought, this Zapatro Rinpoche, he is surely a great Lama, because just from listening to these teachings, I've completely abandoned anger. When Zapatro heard this, his reaction was to become perturbed, actually. He's like, how can this person think that like in 1 or 2 days that it's going to be so easy that you could abandon anger, right? This is something that takes long-term consistent effort. So Zapatro wasn't so pleased, actually. But, he didn't scold the man directly. He just said, if that's true, right? If you've really been able to overcome that, then surely this is a great thing. Yes. So the next day at the teaching, Zapatro Rinpoche was giving the introductory remarks, and he said that, before we continue with the teachings, I need to warn everybody here. There's somebody who's come to the teachings newly the last couple of days, and he's a thief. So guard your belongings very carefully. And he actually said it the next day, be careful of the thief, and the day after that. So finally, this man lost it. He completely lost his temper. He got really angry. He said, I can't bear it, I can't bear being falsely accused anymore. And so, Zapatro had made very clear to him how he had actually not overcome anger at all, right? Through those skillful means. So, the afflictions are not something easy to overcome. And in order to overcome them, it takes consistent effort over a long period of time. Geshe reminds you of the story of the great Kadampa Geshe, who would actually talk to the afflictions and would say, if you lay off, I can stand back and relax. But if you keep creating problems, I will fight back with the antidotes even more forcefully. So, and this is really the basis, right? This is the measure of whether one's practice is flourishing or not. So, the true holy beings, they always checked for a diminishment of the afflictions.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So is our practice stable or not is inevitably connected to, are the afflictions decreasing? Are they diminishing or not? This is the measure. And so also when we talk about these common practices, so Geshe means common between the Buddhist and the non-Buddhist, like for settling the mind. When we reach a profound state of calm, we can have this misperception actually that I've overcome attachment, right? That I've purified attachment. So challenge yourself by really seeing if you've made the progress you thought you have. Bring to mind or put yourself in the vicinity of that person who you have great attachment for, who you're really attracted to. Bring to mind or put yourself in the vicinity of that person who really irritates you, who makes you angry. And then that is going to be the real test of the validity of your practice. If the mind becomes uncomfortable in the presence of that object of attachment or that object of aversion, then actually, I still have further to go and I have to be more determined in my practice. So this is a scientific approach, right? We're testing what we think we've achieved against the reality. Oh, yep. Loso. So we are on page 94 in the text, about halfway down. The first, an upside down vessel, refers to the time of listening to the teachings, when one is physically present, but one is either falling asleep or one's mind wanders outside. If this is the case, then since our ears and mind are not focused, nothing is retained by our awareness. Just like an upside down vessel, no matter how much water and so forth is poured in, it will not enter. Instead, one should concentrate like a deer listening to beautiful sounds, with all parts of our mind undistracted. Watch the guru with your eyes and focus well on the dharma they teach, up to the tone of their voice. In order to retain the meaning of what is taught, we must concentrate single-pointedly. Yeah. So Geshe said nothing, difficult to explain there. It's pretty straightforward. But if we think about the image of a deer, right? Think about how still it is when it hears sounds. Geshe said even if it hears the sound of a gunshot, right? He's seen this. The deer's reaction is actually to stay perfectly still and focus. He said it's actually kind of a pitiful thing, should have compassion for it, but it's that kind of focus. So when we focus our mind on a virtuous task, such as listening in this way, once we become skilled at that, we'll find that all of our sense faculties experience an arising of a feeling of bliss, right? This is what will happen eventually. And, arising bliss in the different types of sense consciousnesses is important, right? This is why, for example, we set out the various bowls of water at the beginning of every day. They're offerings to the different sense consciousnesses of the holy beings. So when we make these offerings, right, to the gurus and to the meditational deities and so forth, as we offer the offering of the butter lamp, we have to think, that this is offered to the eyes, and that this gives rise to bliss based upon the visual consciousness. As we offer the food, we imagine it goes to the tongue consciousness and gives rise to great bliss of the mind, to the ear consciousness, great bliss to the mind, and so forth. So the funny thing is actually that if we're doing the practice of offering correctly, we're offering to the holy beings, the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, but they're already in bliss. The paradox is that by making the offerings, we create the cause to experience bliss through our sense consciousnesses ourselves. And so we also might ask, well, instead of offering all of the various objects, why do most people offer water? So offering water is something that was done so that we can offer, because we don't have to usually pay very much for water. We can make the offerings with our whole heart without any trace of miserliness and build up to making greater offerings.
Ne kabiba mayon ti dowa shi na ti no chela so ba jo lu ju ke ju me ba wo ne zon do wa tar la mi chi sum ba de nyen na go se no te bi ma sa na ka chi ti ji lo la gon yo cha ji me ba je de ne sha do wa do chun ba je bi chi ne bi ka de ma je ba sha nyo de yi dom cha wa do cha shi je sung tu gi sha.
The second, the fault of a leaky vessel, refers to a vessel that, although not turned upside down, has a leaking base. No matter how much water and so forth is poured in, it cannot be filled and just runs out the bottom. Likewise, although one might listen to the teachings of the guru, if one does not retain them after the teachings finish, nothing comes to mind, having forgotten them. Thus, we become like a leaky pot. Therefore, when listening to the teachings, make a promise not to forget them and remind yourself as you listen. According to the occasion, record the teachings, take notes, and so forth. Any active means to continually retain the meaning. However, if one relies too heavily on taking notes and so forth, when one does not have them, then one cannot remember anything. Just like the saying, knowledge left in the books. So this is actually hinting at the trainings in hearing, contemplation, and meditation, and how they become progressively more difficult. So compared to contemplation, just hearing the teaching well, this is actually easier to train in. So to bring forth the mind that really strives to hear or to study the teaching, this mind is easier to bring forth, and therefore, to get rid of the fault of the upside down pot, this is the easiest one to overcome. But to actually contemplate while listening, that's a little bit more difficult. And so maybe those of you who have gone to like various empowerment ceremonies like the Kala Chakra, right? Just hearing the voice of the Lama explaining the things, maybe that part is easy, but actually contemplating and applying the meditations that you're supposed to do, like, actually trying to conceptualize the visualizations and things that you're supposed to do, that's more difficult. The problem is, though, if we're not an active listener who is thinking about what the Lama says as he or she is saying it, right? we're not going to be able to retain very much of what was taught.
아니 오늘 샤도와 지바렌도 야. 노노도 야.
And then we become like this leaky pot, which is a little bit trickier, right? Because the water's gone in, but eventually most of it is going to leak out.
오다 데이자 단내 샤도와 다위시 듣고게 같이 버려. 데이자 셀 때문이야기.
And so, you know, the antidote to this leaky pot is just first this determination of I'm going to try to retain what I have heard. I'm going to try not to forget. Begins with that intention.
오더도 아까 그 배수도 아까 소소 단도 콜론주 봐도 스틴데 봐 소시데 디데노 요네 용도 셀랑에다 샤기 예저 스티솔라 로카토나 데노 메체 찐요 멍에 봐 리파 레보노라 리세와 된저와이
Sorry, nganso kawadu that Kunu Lama Tenzin Gyatso Jomas.
디다티 데세 배진도아
Oh, right. Sorry. I see. Sorry, I jumped ahead of Geshe by one sentence. My apologies. So he's reading the sentence. However, if one relies too heavily on taking notes and so forth, when one does not have them, then one cannot remember anything like knowledge left in the books.
다 자가랑 마다 배니 몸보체 바살라게 질래니라 나 계신 메아이스 스티자니 게 졸라노를 게 루요로스
Ale. Jaga ale losa.
근데 자가 스케제시 치체사 레빙이네 레비갈 오케이 그 안에 게든 졸라노 세드네
Yeah, so Geshe he said one of his teachers who is at the Buxal settlement. It's like the first settlement was an old prison where the Lamas came in West Bengal. He said that, you know, they had to communicate with the local people, right? Who I guess were speaking Bengali. So so they would write down like all of the Bengali sounds for basic phrases so that they could communicate with the people. But one of his teachers was trying to communicate and he wasn't able to answer. He said, hold on. I have to get my friend with the bag that has all of my notes in, right? So the knowledge was written down there, but if it's not retained, it's not going to be of use. So we have to kind of move beyond the listening to the actual retention, you know, because if we're always dependent on listening to recordings again and again, or always looking at our notes, it means that we haven't retained very much. So Geshe said he's not discouraging you from taking notes, right? Taking notes can be a very good habit, but that taking notes is the bridge to have like a map in your mind of the various important points, of the key points. So Kunu Lama Rinpoche Tenzin Gyaltsen's level of effort and exertion was so outstanding that he attained perfect recall. He was able to immediately reproduce all subtleties of teachings he had heard 30 or 40 years prior without relying on any notes. Los. So Geshe is just giving you sort of an image of Kunu Lama Tenzin Gyaltsen. So before, when Geshe was in Holland, right, Geshe Gyaltsen, the senior Lama there, he recollected meeting Kunu Lama Tenzin Gyaltsen. And he said that Kunu Lama Tenzin Gyaltsen's appearance was so simple that often when people walked by him, they mistook him for a beggar and they would throw change to him, actually. So heed that as a warning, right? We never know where a holy being may be abiding or what their aspect might be.
Yeah, Geshe
said there's like, you know, there's like these misconceptions, right? It's not that every time there's an emanation of Vajrayogini, it's going to be as like a youthful, attractive woman in her prime. We know that sometimes Vajrayogini manifests as a much older woman. She may manifest as somebody with like a physical deformity, right? Vajrayogini can manifest in myriad ways, so we shouldn't rely on prejudices. Ale Ngawang. So one of the Vajrayogini and Chakrasamvara lineage gurus, Krishnacharya Ngawang, the dark one, Krishnacharya, he actually came across an emanation of Vajrayogini, but she was in the form of an old lady who was in very poor health. And he actually kind of looked down at her, not realizing who he was. But one of his students was intelligent enough to be able to see who she really was. And so he came to benefit and realization before his teacher did. That's how the story goes. So the story goes that if Krishnacharya had been able to see her for who she was, but even taken compassion on her for her ill and infirm state and kind of taken care of her, if he had done that, then in that very same lifetime, he would have been able to reach Buddhahood. But because he was not able to do that, it was delayed. Ale, Drung dire dua dene ya padro di getu robache son ko robache maso dene koso nam kala drus. Yeah. So Geshe said that he didn't get into the whole story because he thought maybe you had heard it before, but then he's thinking maybe there's some new people who would like to hear the story again that relates to this. So what happens is that Krishnacharya, who is a great Chakrasamvara lineage master, right? He and his student, they were walking and they came to a great river. I think it was the Ganga, but I'm not sure. And at the side of the great river, there was this old woman. And she was also suffering from the later stages of leprosy, right? So she had legions and so forth all over her skin. And she said, Venerable Sir, can you please take me across the river? Krishnacharya at the time, he kind of dismissed her thinking, well, I mean, look at the state she's in. Like, it's not going to be of much benefit to bring her across the river anyway. So he kind of ignored her, actually. So Krishnacharya's disciple, he thought of it differently. He said, okay, maybe it's not going to be of great benefit to get her to the side of the river, but she's this old woman in the suffering state. So if I can fulfill one wish for her, maybe that would bring her some happiness. And he took off his upper robe and kind of folded it into a blanket to be able to carry her across. So as Krishnacharya was kind of wading across the river and he reached about halfway across, he turned around to look for his student and the woman, and he couldn't see either of them. So of course the story, so the story goes, of course, that the old woman, she was an emanation of Vajrayogini. She transformed into the form of the goddess, and she took Krishnacharya's student into the sky to lead him to Dalpokacha, to pure Dakini land. So it's funny because the teacher was left behind in samsara, right? But the student got to liberation.
Niela Mishashi Jane Mato Mowa Sude. Sunikati Nuji Ningama Shopete, Shajan Zesum Zesun Shi. Then Zisho Razo, Teji, Noji, Shining, Loji Sheka, Sidejo Nojo, Gonago Tuba Meba, Tunga Chambi, the lot of Swini Bashin Dupa, Deta Gibaresa.
So, likewise, when I was receiving teaching, so this is His Holiness the 14th talking, when I was receiving the teachings on the 5th part of the Kalapa grammar from Yongdzin Lingrinpoche, he informed me that because he had not seen the text since he last heard it 30 or 40 years prior, he would have to scan over it quickly. He then went to take the text for the next day's teaching and read over it once briefly. The next day, when I was reading along and receiving the teaching, he was able to give a presentation of the meaning with no impediment and great certainty. We need to become like this. So if we don't merely have the training of hearing, but we also bring forth a mind that wishes to think about and contemplate the teaching, this will help us be able to develop the capacity to recollect the teachings in a powerful way, like in these examples. So it is said that there are just a very few exceptional beings who can realize emptiness merely from hearing. They hear a teaching and they realize emptiness. But there are far more holy beings who contemplate the teachings and through that realize emptiness. So, the different ways that they come to that emptiness, this depends upon, of course, their own virtuous imprints, their various affinities, capacities, and so forth. With respect to the third fault of a dirty vessel, if the vessel is unclean, then whatever amazing food or drink you put in it will no longer be suitable to consume. In this way, if one's motivation is unclean when listening to the dharma, or if one is preoccupied by something incompatible, it is unhelpful. It is wrong to ascertain the meaning of the words of dharma solely for the sake of explaining them to others, or, especially in the case of tantric teachings, gaining fame and esteem through the acts of pacification, increase, magnetizing, and wrath, for the sake of fleeting aims of this life of one's self and others. Likewise, being motivated by jealousy, competition, triumphing over others, and so forth is a huge mistake. So, without this correct motivation, if we are not careful, the hearing and contemplation of the teachings, if this leads one to harm others, it can actually take something like listening or contemplating the Dharma, which is a virtuous activity, and make it into a non-virtuous activity. And so especially for Dharma teachers, for people who are teaching the Dharma, they need to be careful about this. And this is why Geshe always says that, this is why Geshe said that he always talks about the motivation at the beginning of the teaching and tries to get you to think a little bit about the motivation at the beginning, right? That's why that's important. So we will continue. So one thinks, therefore, for the sake of all sentient beings, our mothers in past lives, listen to the words and remember the meaning of Dharma for the sake of attaining the state of complete highest enlightenment. In the beginning, the middle, and the end, we must be embraced by the essence of the pragmatic, altruistic motivation. Therefore, the Bhagavan said, listen well thoroughly and remember. Yeah. Ale. So listen well is hearing, thoroughly is contemplation, and remember is meditation. That Geshe is saying that's what each of those words is linked to, one of those trainings, which overcomes, as he said in the previous class, each of the three faults of the vessel. So we will stop here on page 96, just before the 6 discernments. So on the basis of these instructions, as students, what you want to do is bring forth a mind that truly strives in hearing, in contemplation and meditation. That's the goal of these instructions here. So then back to the discussion of Vajrasattva, and Geshe is just clarifying you that the points about Vajrasattva that he's been explaining in these classes, most of these can be cultivated whether you've received an empowerment or not. So also, just to frame this a little bit, of course, purification is very important, but we must understand it is an auxiliary practice. Why is this the case? Because if all we do is purification practice, we'll never come to the end of misdeeds to purify. So, when we are practicing this, we also can't recollect every single misdeed, even of this life. So what Geshe advises is, before you do your purification practice, bring forth a thought of a big mistake that you've made, something that you feel a really heavy regret for. And on the basis of recollecting that big mistake, imagine I've made similar mistakes. And in this way, you engage in the practice of purification. So think of that big one and then say, along with this great mistake, all of the other misdeeds, greater and smaller, that I have accumulated since beginningless lifetimes, may they be purified. So what's our main task if purification is not? Our main task is to be able to bring forth the mind that can perceive things as they really are, that can perceive the ultimate mode of abiding, this mind of wisdom realizing emptiness, right? That's the ultimate goal. So when we speak about some of the different non-Buddhist Indian spiritual traditions, there are the self-mortifiers. So Geshe was just explaining that these are practitioners who mortify the flesh. I was saying to Geshe, like you still see these in the street, right? Like I've seen them, nail through the tongue and things like this. So they're people who mortify the flesh with the feeling that by doing this, they're going to purify misdeeds. So this is still something that's believed in. So it was at the time the Buddha, he encountered the Lama who is the leader of these self-mortification practitioners. And he said to him that actually you're mistaken, that the purification of misdeeds is the main practice. In fact, this is not the main practice. So Geshe said that in this sadhana, so we came to the end of the self-generation, which Geshe said you can practice if you've received the empowerment. The next one, there's actually a visualization of the front generation in this sadhana as well. So Geshe said this part of the sadhana especially is great, even if you haven't received initiation. So I was saying to Geshe, I just said I want to share with you, this will be ready for you by the end of the month. Ngodrup is working on translating this, and so this will be ready for you by the end of the month.
당원도 제노 메케는 드니지마도 저거요. 야, 다시 니가 내려 제케는 거 아니 그러was.
So the other thing too, Geshe said, when you're practicing this, you'll see that there's sections for the blessing and the making of offerings to the self-generation and to the front generation. But if you're somebody who hasn't received like a full 2-day empowerment, you actually don't have to do that section for the self-generation. You can just directly go to making and blessing the offerings to the front generation.
다 가디나도 다 망사바도 다 레카 몽고요 키는 칼레카 워라was. 손sol티세 요디 원들이 레카 니네 잖아요. 다 마다와 니네 요아레스 지세 요아레스.
And so the other thing too is that when we're actually making the physical offerings, Geshe realizes that, most of us, to survive in these parts of the world, we have to have a job and we have work and family responsibilities. So just filling the bowls with water is perfectly acceptable. But on days when we have time, if you can secure some of the actual offering substances, the food, the flowers, the incense, the light, and make the offerings in a very full way, this can be beneficial.
야, 다님이 다시 와. 용 드시 절라마 도제 셈바도 따지 절. 제 덤바. 때문에 좀 가디나.
Dira?
야.
Yeah.
용 드시 절라마 도제 셈바도 따지 절라마 노제 쇼 옴까 볼레 저게 까비죠. 저 뻗어 몇바시단 더 여보 시단이라.
So just reading from the sadhana, from the front generation of the Lama, solitary Vajrasattva, and all the lineage gurus at their crowns from Om, from letters Om, limitless white-colored lights and nectars appear. These dissolve into the crown of oneself and all sentient beings.
That is good. 로도 년도로 다 야이가 파마니 조시비다 다니에 또 되는 것이 봐도 마시 단도나 세제 요조 메인 넘바치 대바요 봐 시라요 봐서 또 그아레스.
So Geshe said when you're doing this part of the visualization, here it's receiving the white lights and nectars from the Om, right? You visualize yourself receiving those lights and nectars, but on either side of you, you can have your mother and your father, and then people close to you. And then you imagine that behind you, there's a vast assembly of all 6 types of sentient beings, but in human form, with faith and intelligence in the practice. This is how one visualizes. So when you visualize in this way, it's so that we can identify more easily with the vast assembly of sentient beings. So we imagine that although like the hungry ghosts and the animals may be in human form, that the suffering and imprints that they are experiencing are the suffering and imprints specific to those realms. So we imagine that the lights and the nectars, they fall like a very powerful monsoon rain, or Geshe said if it's easier for you to visualize, like a powerful snow blizzard. And all of those lights and nectars, as they reach the crown of the heads of the assembled sentient beings, they dissolve into them. And also keep in mind, right, that as a preliminary to this, earlier in the sadhana, we meditated on refuge and bodhicitta. That's very important, connected with this. So then, as these white-colored light rays and nectars appear and dissolve into oneself and all sentient beings, we imagine that negativities of the body, such as killing, taking what is not given, sexual misconduct, and so forth, along with their latencies and imprints, are completely purified. And then we recite Om Benzasato Samaya Manu Palaya, the 100-syllable mantra. And so Geshe said at this point in the sadhana, you purify those misdeeds of body, you recite as many mantras as you have time for. So the next one. So then the next one is from the front generated Lama as solitary father Vajrasattva, along with the lineage of gurus, from a red at their throat, countless light rays and nectars emanate, that these then fall like a rain and dissolve into the throats of oneself and all sentient beings. As these dissolve into the throats of oneself and sentient beings, all negativities related to speech, such as harsh speech, divisive talk, gossip, and so forth, along with their latencies and imprints, these are all completely purified.
나로서 개와서 바이는 마개와서 바이는 고서로 와서 고서가 다 보게다 대시 그거야. 그래서 고서가 뒤로 파송와서야.
So Geshe said the beauty of this sadhana is that the negativities that we accumulate are through these three doors of body, speech, and mind. So this particular sadhana guides us through a practice of purification of negativities of body, speech, and mind.
다 리라쇼데 예대 좀 봐. 저 바인을 주반노지 당길라바 노지.
Right.
그래서 저게 예제 방강가 슈치 뭐지네.
And we also talked in previous commentary, Geshe talked about the various visualizations we can do for purification. He says that he finds that the easiest purification is the downward voiding purification. So that's where the lights and nectars, they kind of come into the crown and push all of the negativities in the form of unclean substances out the bottom part of the body. But, you can also see, since you're familiar with all of them, you can have the upward voiding purification where the nectars and lights fill the body from the bottom upward, and then all of the negativities are pushed up the top, or the dispelling in the heat purification. You can see which one works for you. And then, so once again, after this visualization as the power of the antidote, one recites the 100-syllable mantra as much as one can. So then the next one from the Lama in the form of the solitary Vajrasattva, along with the lineage gurus, at their hearts appear blue letters Hum, and these emanate blue light rays and nectars that fall like a rain, dissolve into the hearts with a Hum of all sentient beings, and these dispel, and Geshe said, all the negativities of mind, and he said these are the most pernicious ones, right? The negativities of mind, right? So ill will, covetousness, wrong views, and so forth. So all of these are completely purified, and then one recites the mantra. So with these visualization practices also, we're practicing already two of the four powers, the power of the basis and the power of the antidote. And so in each of these visualizations, those two, the base and the antidote, come together.
So
then at this point, one makes an actual confession. Yeah. This is the power of complete eradication, so the power of regret and the power of turning one's back at the fault, sometimes said as the power of the promise. And this is where one confesses all of the misdeeds and negativities to Lama Vajrasattva, promises never to do them again, and says this, alas, all of these negativities I've accumulated and so forth, I will refrain from them. And then specifically transgressions related to the Bodhisattva tantric vows and so forth. Having brought forth this regret and made this promise, one imagines that Lama Vajrasattva is pleased with oneself, and then either he can melt into light and dissolve into the crown, or if you've received empowerment, Gonda Wangshuna, then Lama Giku Ningla Dro. So Geshe said, maybe we don't have to discern empowerment or not here. We can just say for everyone, we imagine that the Lama, his form, as Vajrasattva comes to the crown, melts into the form of lights and nectar, and dissolves into oneself at the heart.
This one.
Yes.
다做的나는 무시 문바이 도체는 가시 뇨.
Yeah.
가시가 지 니스요. 지 쉬려요. 또 저거 노네.
Right.
아그서라 가시가 니가 니스요 추레스. 또 니요.
Yes.
가시가 니가 쓰고요. 레스티디.
Kare.
나는 무시 문바이.
Yeah. Di hamako kaoyame. So
나는 무시 문바이 도체.
Shochong hamako.
당당히 무슨 소소지 봐.
Yahagosong ko nga kone semne kone. Right. Eternity. So then one says that due to unknowingness and ignorance, I have accumulated or I have allowed my commitments and samayas to degenerate. Oh, yep.
나는 무시 문바이 도체는 가시 뇨. 사태. 걸 밀라버레스. 쇼 시고시 가르라고 하잖아. 난 머신은 애서 마시는 말이 비가 노네라.
Yeah.
약간두가 뭐 쳐서 리마소 남바산지도.
So when it says due to unknowingness, Geshe said that this is very clear. It's saying that due to not knowing things, right? Due to ignorance, I've been, so foolish as to engage in these negative actions. So that particular line, very clear that this is the power of complete eradication, which is the mind of regret.
다티 자루 가시게서는 쉬려요. 아레스. 다 던지지 이자 다는 주든가 던지지 냐 저거 잡았냐 봐 지금이.
And so along with that, then one can say, I will not again fall into this heedlessness and make the same mistake.
아그서 다 되는 또 니데 다 녀도는 거야.
And so in that case, it's the power of turning one's back on the fault or the promise. So in this way, you have two of the four powers included in this part of the ritual.
다니셔도 노지단대와 첨부하시는 요 알아봤어. 아니, 빨리 라르 두비 또 하세요. 쇼 다체님 다 머세발라서 방안도 시금 알아봤어. 다 대지가 다 배도 뿡이스.
So holy beings, in terms of the power of the promise, turning one's back on the fault, they give different advice. So some of them say that, in terms of saying, I'll never do it again, something that you're sure you're not going to do, such as kill a human being, say that I will never engage in the act of killing a human being. It can be powerful to bring it forth in this way. So those misdeeds that you know that you're capable of completely avoiding, it's okay to make the promise of, I will never do this again. That is perfectly acceptable. But in terms of those negativities, which you're not really sure you're able to restrain yourself from, if you think there's a risk that I'm probably going to do it again, then you promise for a couple of days, for a week, for a month, or however long you're going to be able to refrain from the action. With the intention that slowly, I will come to abandoning these completely. So in this way, Geshe has concluded the explanation of the visualization combined with the four opponent powers of this Vajrasattva sadhana. So in terms of the four opponent powers of purification, this is related to the accumulation of merits and the purification of negativities. And these are two things we definitely need to cultivate if we are to bring forth realization. Not only just for realizations that we want to bring forth, but many different types of success and progress. These are not going to be possible without the practices of accumulation and purification. And at the conclusion of the purification practice, we should have a feeling that something has definitely been purified, and there should be a feeling of lightness and ease subsequent to the purification practice. So thank you very much. That was what Geshe wanted to present today. So we'll do some short dedications. Oh, you want me to? Okay. I think what I
I should get is, I'm going to ask Dave if he can get me a mouse that's remote, and then I can just do that from here. So, Jangju Semjo Rinpoche Maje Banam Jejur Chi Chewan Yamba Meba Yang Gone Gondu Pewa Sho Toni Tawa Rinpoche Maje Banam Jejur Chi Chewan Yamba Meba Yang Gone Gondu Pewa Sho Jambe Bao Jidar Kemba Dong Kundu Zambo Deyon Dejente Deda Kungi Jesu Dalo Jir Gewa Dida Tamje Rabdungo Dusun Shebe down Chodu Ngapa de Dagi Gewe Tsawa Di Kungyang Zambo Joji Rabdungo Wagi Kangri Rawe Kowe Shinkam De Pendan Dewa Malu Jungwe Ne Chere Ziwan Tenzin Gyatso Yi Shabe Side Bardu Tengyo Chi.
소소 그 교화 코도 고사 비니 바다 도제 sembe 아니 사샤라 라마에도 강실라 때니 오다 송방년 바카 요바이나 강가 파셔네 강가 송바 송보고쇼로 반 로타야지.
So through the merits that we have accumulated together and through the blessing of the Holy Lama as solitary father Vajrasattva, may all the evil thoughts of beings be completely purified and dispelled, and may they only bring forth positive thoughts of loving kindness.
소소 소마노지 로주도 녀레 타포게 타셔네 소마노지 저타야게 절로 때모로지.
And through these merits, may all of my studies and practice be able to come to fruition exactly as I wish for the benefit of all. So we'll pause there, and we can open up the floor for questions. And also, by the way, as always, I tell people, because I know folks are busy, if at the end of the dedications and you need to get on with your day, please feel free. But also, if you'd like to stay for questions, you're most welcome. I don't know if it's muggy in all parts of the world like it is in Southern Ontario, but maybe people are like feeling kind of, I don't know. I find this weather, it's hard to be focused, so maybe there aren't questions. Rebecca, yes, Rebecca, go ahead. We can't hear you though. I think you're. Oh, I see your red mic is still on, so you have to unmute yourself.
Hi there.
Hey.
I was wondering how Geshe-la's trip to Toronto was, and also what he heard about the Dalai Lama, because I don't know if he can tell us anything, but there was a lot of stuff in the newspaper that was really unusual, and then it was immediately taken out of the newspaper. So I was just wondering, he talked about reincarnation, about, being able to transfer to another person during his life, being able to transfer to an adult, not being a male, it might not be a male, that it would not be in China or any other unfree state, and that of course he was definitely going to reincarnate, which pleases everyone. But those were pretty amazing. And then the next articles that came out said, oh, he's just very traditional. He's going to do what he always did before. So I guess in general, I just wanted to know how Geshe-la's trip to Toronto was.
Oh, okay. Gen tambo di Toronto droye cham di kandes chung chikche ane dene jao rumbuche trunkar duchen dro ne dene jao rumbuche kutring jema kola netso sarpa chi kosoes karin sana nguma jao rumbuche dramen dra nampa dabo chik sungire dua chi chena drungjuk sena gompa mazo ngela roa shepa di mijenda gi lupo nangola Julia Luya kandes dabo chi kere yamana chi chena pume chi kegire duas ine dinsang like hope the kala dabo chi sungye dinsu sheda mepa che ane nguma nangshin gompa zone katsu tutu shudene gompa zone kewa jema dapo chik drogires ine rawang yosa jana dang rawang mesa dinso dapo mepa chik dinso takche so dene di netsu di sebo koso ane Toronto kande chunsa
Toronto pe ki wo tane kandi ga chuka ti singa zo page chimba ye ta ale tu da mo ma.
Yeah. So first of all, he very much enjoys going to Toronto, and he very much enjoyed this trip, especially because we were able to go to His Holiness the Great 14th's birthday celebration. And Geshe was saying there was he estimates over 10,000 people. It's definitely possible. Over 10,000 people there, and you could see all the Tibetan customs and the music and the dancing and all those things. So of course he enjoyed that very much. He said Ngodrup got bored and wanted to leave a bit early. I wasn't bored with the dancing or with His Holiness, for the record. It was more like the politician speeches. You know, you have the MPs and the MPPs all doing their speech. But yeah. So Geshe said, my parents, they go away in the summer to visit my sister in Nova Scotia, so we can stay in their place downtown. And he very much enjoys being there because he can go to these Tibetan events and putter around. So we always have a good time down there. So as far as what you were asking about, Rebecca, with the future incarnation of His Holiness, he doesn't understand much different from what you understood, which is that it's Geshe-la's understanding that it's going to be kind of old school in terms of, His Holiness will stay as long as he can, and then when it's time to pass away, then he'll be reincarnated as a child in a subsequent lifetime in a place of freedom in his choosing. So that's what he understood as well. But Geshe would like to remind all of you that if we study and practice and dedicate the merits well, it's possible that His Holiness is even around for another 20 years or more, so that's also up to us. And now His Holiness is in Ladakh, which is nice because it's like a drier climate, and hopefully that's good for his health as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Rebecca. Yeah, so Geshe said, as His Holiness goes to Ladakh and relaxes and enjoys himself, we also relax at the same time that we study and practice. Any other questions?
I'm new today. May I just introduce myself to Geshe-la and say thank you?
Yes, for sure.
All right. I'm
What's your name?
Nancy Black.
Nancy Black. Nichik tema tambores ko Geshe-la hello labnin drogitusa.
Yes, so Tashi Dele, Tuchiche Geshe-la. I'm a friend of Rebecca, so she helped me get online, and I don't need to drone on and on, but in a separate email I can let you know with whom I've studied and my long involvement with practice.
For sure, Nancy, you
so
can, if you want to get a message to Geshe-la, Rebecca has my email, but it's Ngodrup@lamayesheling.org. Maybe Abhilash can put it in the chat.
I think you and I have had an email. I brought it
up. Oh, have
to
we? Oh, okay. Yes, then you know how to reach me. Okay.
Ngodrup@gesheling.
Yeah, at lamayesheling.org. Yep.
Right. Okay. All right.
Well, anyways, welcome. Very welcome.
Yes. Thank you. Okay.
야, 근데 저 만드는 가 주냐 뭐시기 같이 뭐 있습니다.
So Geshe said, since there's not a lot of questions, he thinks we can close with a story today, and then we'll call it a morning.
메다데 들어가서 말다. 저 같이 뭐 했어.
And this is an important story, not just any story, apparently.
진짜요. 당가마 손지 손 맞지 뱅야라 손지 생각가 다저 원래 가발레 하면고. 근데 다 염리가 같이 했어.
So this is the story about the being who became a Buddha, but this is at the time that he was engaged in the Bodhisattva practices. Geshe's not sure what ground he had reached, but anyways, he was engaged in the Bodhisattva practices.
다가 디딜었더니 아니 lumbatela 중세
Bramse. And in the country that the being who became the Buddha was living, there was a great guru of the Brahmin lineage, of the Brahmin practice. And so this story is very important, particularly as to how to choose to rely or not to rely on different types of teachers. And so that's why Geshe wanted to share this story today. So at that time, of course, the Buddha, the being who became the Buddha, he wasn't enlightened yet. He was a bodhisattva practicing the path. And in that particular lifetime, he was the student of this Brahmin teacher. And so the Brahmin guru, he said that when the time comes for me to leave for this world, I need a regent. I need somebody who's going to take my place. He didn't state this, he didn't state this publicly, but this was a worry. This is something that was weighing on his mind. So at the time, there was also a law that when great gurus of the Brahmin lineage were no longer able to function, were sort of older and not functioning properly, that it was permitted for their students to take and use their wealth and resources. So Geshe said that this was actually a law. He's not sure if it was a law of Manu or some other Vedic scripture, but anyways, it's a Vedic law that was practiced at the time. So this Brahmin guru, he was like a very kind of like direct person, and so he actually said, I'm kind of past it, right? I'm too old to be of much use to you, so whatever you'd like of my things, you can take them away and use them as you will. He called his disciples and told them that. So most of his disciples, they took him at his word and thought, they wanted a few things. So in this way, most of his belongings, most of his wealth was carried off. But there was one young student who didn't go to grab sort of things to take away with him. And that small child student, this was actually the being that became a Buddha in his previous rebirth. And so the Brahmin guru asked him, he said, everybody went to get the things that they wanted, so why didn't you go with them? And he said, because even if your guru instructs you, you should pillage another's wealth, pillaging another's wealth is something that is non-virtuous. And so even if the guru says it, one should not do it. So the Brahmin guru, of course, chose him to be his regent after his passing, thinking this is somebody who really knows how to analyze dharma. Yep. So Geshe is telling this story because we have to be very careful these days in who we choose to rely on as a spiritual teacher. But he reminds you that even if you rely on someone as your guru, if he or she advises you to do something which is non-virtuous, which goes against the conduct of dharma,
you are allowed to excuse yourself and say, I cannot do it.
다 수세 강가 녀거사 노지 자침보 배제 두고 해야 되네. 다 되어 있어도 다 더 터나도 야보 이제라 왔어. 다 이나요. 된다. 이나한테 로나 뜨는지.
So, of course, you know, in some of the tantric texts that say you have to be doing whatever is said, but Geshe feels that if you look on balance at the advice on the scriptures, this is the general thing. We do as much as we can, but we are allowed to excuse ourselves from something that we think is in contradiction to the dharma. In the sutras spoken by the Buddha himself, it says very clearly that if the teacher advises something that is contrary to our understanding of the dharma, that one should not follow the advice. This is very clear. So that's one important thing that he wanted to share, and maybe there's more later. Does that take us to the end of questions? I did see a message flash, Abhilash, but are we at the end of questions now?
There was one question in the chat, and I can read that.
Yeah, do you want to read it out?
Yeah. So Bridget asks, when you're making offerings to the wisdom being, what are the importance of mudras? And where can you learn them?
And so, chaja, chupa pupe kapala chaja halepe ke champores and chaja din so kawane jangores.
Mita shaja to kangon samare shaja teji ka champore sena da shena de ha le cha chimbo so yo mar so da se so wanda ho nyo chin da bo so yo ngena chena.
So Geshe said that while the mudras are important, they're not the most important thing. When making the offerings. And the other thing he wants to advise too is that when we do the mudras, in our tradition, the mudras are done very subtly and not in a big sweeping movement like you see in other traditions. You're supposed to be kind of on the down low about how you do your mudras. So Geshe said that he has demonstrated the mudras in previous classes for people, although Geshe said he's not the best at the mudras by any means, but he said Ngodrup can send you something. So Richard, if you send me an email, there is a video on YouTube actually of a friend of Geshe's. Geshe somebody Yeah. So a friend of Geshe's, Geshe Sampo, he's very good in mudras. He's made a video, so I can send you that if you email me. And Geshe said that also at the beginning of the mudras, remember, if you're offering to the front generation, you have to snap outwards. If you're offering to the self generation, you have to snap inwards. And also, for the different practices you do, there's different systems of mudras. So if you're doing a Kriya action tantra practice, that's going to be different from the mantras you use in your highest yoga or Anuttara yoga practice. So yeah, so later he can comment a little bit more on that. But in the meantime, Richard, if you email me, I'm happy to send you the video of the Kriya tantra, of the action tantra mudras. All right. I don't see any other hands, so I think that we will call it a day, and we will see you next week. Thanks, everybody.
Tashi dele.
Be well. Enjoy your
Tashi dele.
Tashi dele. Tashi dele.
Tashi dele.
Thank you.